So, good morning. Welcome to this event called Repair What You Wear, which is a part of Bellevue College's Earth Week. Can everyone hear me okay? Quick thumbs up. Yep, we're good. Great. So, as a part of Bellevue College's Earth Week, we're exploring topics around the theme, The Future is Now, which strives for a just and sustainable future for all. You can see our full schedule of events by visiting the link that we will post in the chat box. Alyssa, that was posted privately, so please send to the whole group. My name's Amber Nicholson, and I'm from the Bellevue College Office of Sustainability, and myself and my colleague Alyssa will be moderating this event. Before we get started, we have some things to go over. You are muted on joining, and we would like for you to stay on mute unless you are actively asking a question or responding to a prompt from the speaker. If you'd like to keep your camera on, it does make for a more engaging session for everyone. This event is also being recorded to post to our sustainability webpage. Throughout the session, please treat everyone with respect and share your comments and questions in the chat box, and we will open up for Q&A at the end where you can either unmute yourself or have us read out your question. For the best Zoom experience, we will begin with using speaker view by clicking a button in the top right corner, but later on it might be suggested that you use gallery view because Roz today is both using a camera to speak and a camera to sew directly below. Lastly, we pause to acknowledge that Bellevue College resides on the traditional and occupied land of the Coast Salish peoples, past, present, and future, that includes but is not limited to Snoqualmie, Suquamish, Duwamish, Nisqually, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot. We honor their connection to the region, pay respect to Coast Salish elders past and present, and stand in solidarity through their struggles with continued systemic oppression. We commit to care for land and water and center equity at the core of our unlearning. Now, let me take a quick moment to introduce our workshop leader, Roz. I'm just pulling up the bio. All right, Roz Studd teaches fashion, textiles, and loves teaching. She started her professional life as a retail buyer and product developer for big fashion names. Textiles are her thing, and she loves manufacturing, but not the current levels of pollution and waste it creates. The project came about when she realized how much money she saved by mending her children's clothes and that others did not have the same skills to make this choice. Her website and project, Repair What You Wear, is all about proper teaching and what the student can achieve for themselves. Welcome, Roz. We're so happy to have you.
I'm very happy. And I have to say good afternoon, everybody, because I'm in Scotland. I'm a long way away from you, but it's extremely nice to meet you all. So yes, I started off as a retail buyer and I've been in textiles all my life. And I changed to teaching about 15 years ago now. So I've taught in universities and in colleges. But some time ago, I was mending some stuff and I just thought I can save money and save the clothes by doing this, but plenty of people can't. So I set about setting up Repair What You Wear. And it's a completely free resource because it's my legacy project. And the environment is fashion has got increased in volume, and it has increased, doubled in the last 15 years. Some say that the number of garments being bought have doubled in the last 10 years. And by 2030, it's due to increase again by another 63%. And I'm going to run you through just a few visuals, and then I'm going to run you through the website. Then I'm going to have a little bit of fun showing you some mending and talking about fabrics and fibers. Then hopefully we'll have some Q&As. So I'm going to start off by screen sharing. Oh, you got my inbox there, but don't worry. Yeah, I'm a bit casual with this stuff, but so here we go. This is where carbon emissions come from. So fashion is responsible for 10% of carbon emissions now. That's a very large number, and it's increasing year on year because as clothes have got cheaper and they've become more disposable, then we're buying more. It's almost like buying chocolates or a piece of cake, but nothing has the damage that this has on the environment. 71%, all that red stuff, is the making of your clothes. And so we need, from an environmental perspective, to buy less, buy well, and wear longer, and repairing is part of that process. Clothing makes us feel good. We feel that it expresses who we are, and we feel bonded, we feel safe, but it's got out of control at the moment. There are fibers and fabrics that are causing us issues. So I always used to hold out hope of cellulosic cloth because it's derived from the cellulose from trees, and originally it was fast-growing pines and all in controlled forests. But right now, 150 million trees are being cut down per annum for fashion and apparel. And that's this year's figure, because my last statistic was 70 million trees. So it's nearly doubled in the last couple of years. Viscose has gone from being 5% of the total fibers in clothing to being 8%. And so what's happening, of course, is that we're cutting down the very trees that are good for our planet and absorbing carbon in order to wear clothes, which is not sustainable, really. Oh, why is it not moving? Hold on. Yeah. Also, pesticides. I'm afraid cotton production is responsible for between 8 and I think about 12% of pesticide use and insecticide use, and that's worldwide. This is huge production in the States, but you still see people going around in places like India just spraying, not wearing masks, spraying cotton. So cotton uses up a lot of water in production. 73% of the land is irrigated, and mostly it's grown in countries with poor amounts of water, but it's also hugely, at one point in 2010, 23% of the world's insecticides were on cotton production, which is massive. Sadly, it's also, fashion is responsible for 17 to 20% of global water pollution. And this is what happens at the end. Whatever we do with our clothing, whether we give it away to clothing banks or thrift shops or whatever, a lot of it doesn't get resold. It gets exported to countries where they themselves can't sell it, and it ends up in landfill. So the statistic is that 80% of our clothing ends up in landfill. A lot of the landfills are very poorly managed. They're not necessarily in our countries, and they leach into the land and waterways. And clothing used to be taught in schools. Now, this is a very old-fashioned photograph from an English school mending, excuse me, used to be taught in schools. This is from the 1900s, but now it's really taught by families. So you have a privilege, really, if you now know how clothes are made and you understand it and you are able to mend for yourself. It's now a privilege, whereas I felt it should be a right, that it was really important. So it also has a financial impact, because everybody needs to look after their money, and especially now, there are the very rich, but lots of people are struggling. And if you can save buying a new garment to replace the one that split or button fell off, or it's just a boring piece of, I don't know, clothing you wear to your cafe job, if you can keep it going, you save yourself money. So we founded Repair What You Wear. And now I'll go onto the internet and I'll tell you a little bit about that. So I'll take this away. So Repair What You Wear, here are we. This is our website. The idea is that it's not about personality. I mean, you can tell I'm older anyway, but I have a lot of knowledge. It's about learning for yourself. So we've broken the website tutorials down into core mending skills. Now, if you learn these, then you really can mend about, I don't know, 70, 80% of your clothing. So even threading a needle, I'll show you that in a minute. If you don't thread a needle right, if you don't start off right, it can really put you off. So these things, threading a needle, sewing on a button. If you don't know how to backstitch, there's a sort of tutorially, teachery thing here. And you can choose left-handed or right-handed. And then there's a real mend, so you can see it in action and see how you work with it in reality. If you're doing a hem, herringbone, very old-fashioned, but very useful. Ladder stitch closes all those garments where you can't access the inside, but you've got a split. And ladder stitch is very useful. With those, you can mend most things. So I would like to show you a few other things, actually, in order not to jump around. Sorry, can you stick with me a little bit longer on this? I know, excuse me. If you ever want to do embroidery, but you're not sure, this originally was designed for kids, but you can still learn for yourself all the different embroidery instructions. And then you can do some nice stuff. And I'll show you some illustrations of that later when I'm looking on my camera. General men's. You can choose from any of these things. This, our jean mending video, which is a hole in a video, hole in jeans, has had now nearly 100,000 views on YouTube. So that's a fantastic achievement, considering we haven't been going very long at all. Everything else is rather small, but that doesn't matter, because for everyone who looks and learns, it's progress, isn't it? Everybody's making a difference. And then we go through and look at lots of different things. So how to fray your jeans when they're going at the end, how to do decorations, how to mend knitwear. This is mending small holes in knitwear is the second most popular video, and that doesn't surprise me. You guys are in California, aren't you? So maybe you don't need knitwear a lot, but we need knitwear a lot in Scotland. And so you just flick through and find all these things. And it's got to do too that if you get confident, you can start to change your clothing. And here I turned a dress into a jumper. These would have gone in the bin. So every time I put my cursor on it, it goes gray. These yoga pants would have gone in the bin, but there was a bit of fun with some decorative mending. Decorative mending is really popular at the moment. And we've got some core decorative mends on our website. And if you get to grips with those, then you'll be able to look at all those wonderful artists doing fantastic decorative mends on the web and just start off with that. This is using a blanket stitch, which is taught on the core embroidery skills, but you use it in a more imaginative way, and you can create the most wonderful roundels so that you're not darning. Well, it's different to darning. So this is the sort of thing we have on our website, and we're adding more all the time. There's even sportswear and shoes, cycling jackets, everything. Now I'm going to show you and talk to you practically for a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to shut down my screen share and go to my needle and thread. You'll have to look at the side of me for a bit, which, you know, and do ask any questions anytime. I've asked the girls to keep their eyes open if there's any questions. People ask me, what do you need to mend? And I reckon that this is a sort of good basic kit. Some hand needles and a household assortment. Don't really buy those little fine needles. You need something where you've got a variety. Just some ordinary pins. You won't need many. And threads, any old threads really. But if you're worried about color matching, you can try these and they look beautiful. But you might be just as well to have some old ends of threads. And when you have a garment that needs mending, that's a very particular garment and very specific color, then you buy the thread to match. Otherwise, just collect threads as you go. It's always useful to collect your buttons. So have a button jar at all times. And if there's a garment that you are going to throw out because it really is at the end of its life, it's dead, cut all the buttons off, cut anything else, cut the zips out, create your own stash. These are the sort of patching things I keep. Always useful. An old t-shirt that was completely beyond repair, 100% cotton. Keep it because you'll need it for patching. This was an old pajama bottoms. They'd been mended about 5 times and the fabric was so weak that it was just collapsing. So cut the legs off because They're usually good bits in the legs. Nice cotton, again, good for patching. And then the same, keep a bit of jeans. So that's what makes a really good stash, I think, and you can start mending. I'm going to show you threading a needle. And you may not believe this, because you may think, why on earth is she teaching me to thread a needle? I cut myself when I was cooking. Sorry, show the cameras in the right place. I cut myself while I was cooking. So I've got this nasty plaster, usually by using my index finger. First of all, you need to trim it really well. So you've trimmed the thread, and then you flatten it with your fingers. And then you hold it between your finger and your thumb. And you could just see it poking out when you pull them apart, but it's very low. And then you lower the needle on top. There we are. First time. Okay, and that, hand steady, and you take the thread to the needle to the thread. You don't do it otherwise. Let's look at one simple mend. This is a t-shirt I've been saving for you guys, actually, because the thing about mending is that some holes are sort of socially acceptable now. You know, who cares? You got a bit of a hole somewhere, but some holes are really not. And seams are not really acceptable holes because they just don't look designery, do they? But you need to mend them with backstitch. So here's an example. Somebody must have taken a bit of a chunk out of this t-shirt, so we've lost the proper edge, but that won't matter. I'm going to put my needle in just beyond the stitching line and leave a little end, and then go over the same place 1, 2, 3 times. That's much better than knotting. I never knot, because you find that when you pull your thread through, it pulls through the material. Backstitch is the most useful stitch. So you create one stitch, then you go back, as we said, to where it's come up again. Shall I lower my camera, guys? Thumbs up, shall I lower my camera? Yeah? What do you think, Amber?
I think it's fine.
You think it's fine? Thanks. So I go back and come up again. Apologies to those of you who are already really good at repairing, because you will think that this is just too basic. But I don't know on the call how many of you it's the first time. What's important though about stitches like this is that they're even. You don't pull the fabric too closely together. You just lay it flat. And a backstitch suits this kind of seam. There's not a lot of pressure on it. But there is stretch in the material. And because the material is stretching, you need a stitch that's going to stretch with it. So I would go all the way to the end, secure, and then trim it. Backstitch is useful because this is stretchy material, and a backstitch stitch will stretch at the same time. Let's have a look from the front. There. I haven't pulled it very tight, and I'm using yellow. There we are. On average, mends take between 5 and 10 minutes. If you're speedy, they can take 2. And that means that you can fix your garment, whatever it is. I don't know how much you'd save each time. $5, $10 at a go, minimum. Because it could be that you're fixing a jacket. It could be that you're fixing a t-shirt. They vary in cost. I always think, and I live in the UK, £10 a mend. Well, where else can you earn £10? Well, unless you become a trader or something like that, in between 5 and 10 minutes. I think it's a really important thing to remember that. It's your time, yeah, but it's also your saving. So that's a really good basic stitch. And now I want to talk about materials, because how you stitch things depends upon the material that you're working with. This is a t-shirt, it's knitted. So it has 3-way stretch. That's really important. Therefore, all the stitches you use should be a bit stretchy. Backstitch is excellent for that. If we look at other knits, your sweat material for wearing with your hoodies is also a knit. It's got 3-way stretch in it. Your sports clothes will almost always be knit. And here's a pair of running trousers with a massive great hole in them. There. The person fell and tore everything. Normally we'd throw that away, wouldn't we? And really, we've all got to get ourselves in the feeling where we don't throw it away. We feel proud that we're not throwing things away, that actually mending something shows your moral compass, really, that you wouldn't go to a wedding or out to impress in a suit to an interview with a massive great mend in it. But who's going to mind if you mend something like this? And what's important about all these knitted items and most of your sports clothing is it's synthetic. And synthetic is plastic, and it simply doesn't biodegrade. You can incinerate it so that if you put it in the right, I suppose, trash bin, and it goes to be incinerated, then it could create energy. But you're still left with the chemical synthetic residue from that. I think it's our duty to try and mend sportswear. And when you're looking at these knits, and especially sportswear, it's a really good idea to use a special kind of yarn. It doesn't cost much. I bought this from a UK supplier. I'm going to take my jeans away because you won't be able, the jeggings away because you won't be able to see this. But this is a nylon thread, and nylon and polyesters, they all are spun so finely that they become multi-fibers. That's why they're so very useful. You know, microfibers, not multi-fibers, microfibers, and this is a multi-fibered thread. Can you see the tiny little fibers in that? You're then mending all your synthetic product with a synthetic yarn, and it's worth doing that for your for the likes of these trousers, these jeggings. What I would do in this instance, and this is important, is I would put a patch behind them. Because when you've got a split like this, it doesn't matter whether it's jeans, shirts, or this sort of thing. The materials have been split. So if you gather them and think, oh, I'm going to stitch them together, I'm going to make a seam, they not only look bulky, but the minute you put any pressure on them, ping, they're going to just break out again. So what you need to do is patch. And the reason why I was talking about the different types of materials is you need to patch with the right material. So here we are. I'm not going to do this in front of you because it'll be a big mend, and you're going to be able to watch this mend on my channel when I've finished it. But I would take a soft piece of jersey like this. I'm not even sure if I've cut this to fit. This is stretchy. This is stretchy. And I would tuck it under. There. And then stitch it down onto it, and then embroider or do something nice over the top. It wouldn't be that visible because I have this thread. I'm going to be using this stretchy thread, but it will hold the fibers down in place and it'll reinforce that area by having a patch behind. But I'm doing that with knitwear and knitwear. That was really a message I wanted to get across to you guys, to think about what your garments are made of and how they're constructed. It really helps you understand how to fix them. So if we look now at woven cloth, we're all familiar with jeans. I mean, everyone must want to mend their jeans if our little Repair What You Wear has already had 100,000 views. And again, it's the same thing. If you have a woven material, you need to patch it with a woven material. Woven materials are woven on a loom where there's a warp, that's the vertical. Actually, I've got something better here. That's what I wanted to show you. The warp is the yarn that comes down through the weaving machine all the way vertically. And the weft is the yarn that goes across the way and weaves in and out of the warp. So what you've got is you've got fabric generally, unless there's elastane in it which makes it stretch, which doesn't stretch in the vertical, doesn't stretch in the horizontal because you're pulling along the lines, but will stretch in the diagonal, which we call the bias. So a little tip, and you may know this already, if you're patching or you're putting reinforcement behind, then you need to make sure that you use your fabric in the right way, in the right direction. And I'm going to give you a little illustration of that. This is an unfinished patch in jeans. I have a friend who works with kids, and I was going to turn this into a little smiley face in a cloud with loads of embroidery. This is another old jean material supporting the area behind, which has started to be worn out. And I had to cut it in the right direction. So the jeans warp, let's look at it this way. Upright in the jeans, the warp is going in the vertical and the weft in the horizontal. And so when I put the patch in, I had to match it. If I had got it skew with, or that's a lovely British expression, isn't it? Skew with. If I'd put it in incorrectly, say it was sideways, the fabrics would react against each other and you wouldn't have a neat finish. You can patch underneath and then embroider or include, and you can patch on the top. As we've said, patching is really good when something is starting to split, break, or become weak, because you're reinforcing that area, and you're also you're making a mend that's not going to split immediately again. It's nice and flat. It was how it was meant to be. These are two knee illustrations. I did a video. It's a bit long. But if you've never done any of these sorts of stitching before, watch it, because it'll get you into understanding what you're doing. Sachiko mending, which is this Japanese style, sort of simple style of mending, is everywhere. You can look it up. There's loads of beautiful things being done. It starts off, though, simply with a running stitch. And a running stitch can attach the fabrics on the top. You don't have to include them in any other way. So here we've got just a little loose cotton, which will fray around the edges and look okay. And here we've got one which I put at an angle on purpose. So whereas I've just said we need to make sure it's in line, this is purposefully on the horizontal. So if you're using it as a design feature, that's fine, but it needs to be a strong fabric. Let's just look briefly at this sashiko style mending.
Roz, there's also a question in the chat about how tips on mending socks.
Oh yeah, thank you. Okay, no problem. In fact, I've got some tights here, so I'll show you. That's good. If you're mending jeans like this, all of this area is weak around here, the whole lot. So what you do is you put in your jeans in the right direction, your spare patch, cover the entire area, and you do I'm doing it in yellow, and specifically in yellow. You do a tiny back stitch and a big stitch in between. Tiny back stitch and a big stitch in between. And when you're doing things like this, you want to keep them flat. I've used a piece of card so I can keep it flat, and I'm using both hands. Normally you sew with the hand, your dominant hand, excuse me, and your helping hand is your other hand. I'm right-handed. In this instance, I don't want to scrabble up the material, it'll stop. I'm not going to do this mend in front of you, it'll be boring. So I'm just showing you that you do a tiny little stitch here and a bigger gap. So you secure that patch down really nicely. And then you take your thread, which you're going to embroider with. I think you call this embroidery floss in the States, do you? Yeah? Okay, so this sashiko mending, you can buy all sorts of sashiko yarns and stuff, depends upon your budget. I use this stuff. So flossing is just good for decorative. Has 6 strands, and I think 2 or 3 is good, no more. It's too bulky, it doesn't want to go through any fabric. So you separate it out and try not to get it in a knot. And then thread it into the needle. Same way. Don't use too big a needle, just use the biggest from your household selection, because the really big needles won't go through this fabric. I'm just going to show you briefly what the stitch is like. So I won't, you secure it on the back. So 1, 2, secure enough? Yeah. Take it through where you want to stitch. You can mark it if you want with a special textile pencil or something. I just sometimes just do freehand. And then, actually, now I do need my other hand, so I should take out the cardboard. So when you're doing this sort of running stitch, you want to go in, out, like that. Lots of times. And then just pull your thread through. That's all you do, and create the patterns you want. If you want to have a look at some of decorative patterns, you can look at our decorative jeans. I did it sadly in a rather dull color, but you can decorate any number of things using these threads. And then what you would have done is go up and down, up and down, up and down, maybe put in some stars, go all the way across here because it's weak there, and do some other form of decoration down here, I could do some cross stitch. As I say, look at one of my videos. And then you've created something that's decorative and attractive, functional, and you still saved your jeans. And you know, you really don't have to be a great sewer to do this. It's not like making a dress. You're just learning some core skills that gets you through, and it makes you look creative too. Before I go into socks, and I'll use this yellow thread for socks, I'll find the tights my daughter gave me. I want to just touch on a couple of things. One is you can buy floss that's got, it's called space dyed floss, so it has different colors within it. So if you know you're going to want to do some embroidery and you want lots of difference in color, but you don't want to keep changing your threads, that's quite a good tip. I'm going to come on to darning in a minute, well, knitwear in a minute, but I just want to say lots of people have knitwear, have darning mushrooms. I'm not a great darner because I think of other things to do, and I'll explain why I'm not a great darner in a minute. But I just take a jam jar lid and put masking tape over it. It's not very slippery as a result. It's not round enough probably. I think I'd rather find a better one. But you can pull the fabric, round it and everything and manipulate it with this, and it costs nothing. On our website, you'll see that we've mended jackets with no sewing. I don't know what the weather's like with you actually. Do you ever wear, that's so ignorant. Do you ever wear down jackets, you guys?
We're in Washington actually, so yeah, we do wear down jackets quite a bit.
Oh, good, okay.
Yeah.
You know when your down jacket splits, you bump it against something and it tears, you absolutely can't sew it together because when you sew it, it bunches up and also all the feathers still keep coming out. Well, this is something called a spinnaker tape. It's sailing tape. And if you cut it really nicely, and we've got a video of that, you can save your down jacket for a long time. There's a whole variety of colors just by sticking this on. And it'll last for some time, some washes. And then when you need to do it again, you wash it so the feathers don't come out and then cut another length. And then the same for waterproof jackets. So I've just done a video with this, which is a Dacron nylon. And here we have another stick-on patch. It's nylon, you can't sew through it because it's a microfiber and it is so fine that needles would ruin it. And that's the same with a lot of your waterproof coats. They'd be ruined by it. Ruined by a needle if you had to mend a hole. But you can either choose a color that looks acceptable, cut it to a shape that you quite like, although I don't recommend small corners. Kooky things like hearts sound good, but they will just come undone really quickly. And they come in lots of different colors, so you can just try and choose the color that best suits what you've got. This is gray, black. I'm gonna just see if I can see these tights. If not, I'll go and grab something. Is there anything anybody else wants me to demonstrate? Oh, Sarah O'Neill raised a hand. What's she written? Hang on, Sarah.
Oh. Do you have any like tips or anything on repairing like leather boots or leather stuff?
Yeah, I do actually. The tip is find someone else to do it. Yeah, I mean, I'm wearing shoes at the moment that I've had mended twice in a shoemaker. And yeah, this year I spent £20 on them, and the guy said, do you really want to do that? And I absolutely do, because they're beautiful, you know. I wear them 3 times a week. Leather requires special needles. And some buttonhole thread, neither of which would cost you a huge amount. You could have a play round. And if you need to keep something in position, then you could play around with different glues so that you glue it, but without marking the leather. So you glue it from behind before you then stitch it. It's a sort of double security thing.
Okay.
Might that work? I don't know.
I think so, but I'm not sure.
Okay. I mean, Emily has asked, what's the name of that fabric patch she showed us? The special fabric room. Well, if we go back, your down jacket and your waterproof jackets would all be ruined by you sticking a needle in them. Not in the seams. If there's a split in the seam, then you can use ladder stitch to mend it. Again, go on my website, look up coats and jackets, look up ladder stitch. But if it's on the material itself, there's usually a waterproof membrane behind it and it would be completely ruined. So again, I say on the tutorials, one is, this one is called spinnaker tape. It's got a very fine line in it. It's ripstop. And it's very fine. And then the other is, this is called just a nylon. But I looked up, when I was going to buy this, I looked up Dacron, Dacron, Dacron. It's flatter and slightly thicker than this. So I use this on the down jacket, that on my waterproof jacket. Is that all right, Emily?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. While I'm looking for these tights, any more questions? And I'll show you some knitwear if you'd like me to. Where can I put them? Here they are on the back of my chair. Okay. What sort of socks are we talking about, folks? Anybody want to write anything down? What kind of socks? Are we talking thick socks, thin socks? Thick socks. Okay, all right. So it's important that you use the right materials. When working on wool or synthetic wool, but larger knitwear, I use this darning yarn. I don't know whether the brand would be the same for you. It is partly wool and nylon. And okay, it's synthetic again. But the thing is that if you're sewing with and pulling tight, you need the nylon to keep the strength. So if you, depending upon the sock, and if we're just talking about an ordinary hole, then I'll show you what to do. You either mend with a wool like this, or you mend with double yarn. I'm talking about sort of thinnish socks with double yarns and tights. So basically, I do a very simple whip stitch. It's about the only time I use a whip stitch. I'll show you. Find this hole. Are you talking about, who was that? Oh, Emily, you again on socks too. No, Catherine, socks. Are you talking about having something that needs darning? Yes, okay. In that case, let's do a tiny bit of darning on this. As my daughter just gave me these the other day, said there's a huge hole in them, and then didn't tell me what the hole was. And it is actually a darning hole. So this is where I would take my, could be a little bowl, it could be anything. Okay, like that. Then I'm going to thread up with some darning yarn. I'll use red just so you can see it. Sorry, guys. Watch me do this. I've got a lot of different ideas about knitwear, and I'll show you some illustrations of something in a minute. I can't do that with my plaster. And so if you have holes in knitwear, there's all sorts of practical solutions, because darning is really hard, and darning is one of those things where you're either good or not. Oh, it's not working. Excuse me, guys. So I like to think about solutions. And the reason why I find darning, I don't think that darning is always the best solution, is because, you know, we looked at fabric with the warp and weft. And a warp and a weft fabric is the one that doesn't stretch. But knitwear is three-way stretch. That's what we looked at, didn't we? So what you're doing is you're effectively making a non-stretchy material and putting it on something that's naturally stretchy. So I don't always think that's good. But here we have a hole right in the bottom of a sock. So it really is the right thing to do, because you've got to cover it somehow. So what you would then do is darn. And with darning, it takes a long time darning. I'm only going to give you a minor illustration. And I will do some darning tutorials in the next week or so and put them on. You create a warp and a weft across. And you don't want to make it too stretched or too narrow. So what you do is you go back and forth like I'm doing, creating a warp and a weft, not too far apart, because otherwise you make a very rather a loose material. And pretend I'm at the other end. When you're ready, you start weaving in and out, back and forwards. You pick up one thread at a time. There, alternate threads, excuse me. Go to one side and then you come back. There. When you're doing socks, actually, a mushroom is quite a good shape. This is a bit flat. My top of my jar is a bit flat. There we are. And so back again. That's it. So do you get that idea? Yeah. Before we move on to the next question, I'm just going to show you a little bit of knitwear. I'm going to do a class on Friday afternoon on knitwear. And once you start to be able to sew with wool and you feel more confident, you can make up your own attractive sort of darning ideas. So this is a little chain stitch around the outside with inside a bit of darning. This, I decided to cut out a whole patch so that it would become a square. Well, it's not square, become a, instead of being over anything, any gray material behind, it's just literally red darning. Here, I lifted it up and over the yarn where, sorry, the jumper where there was a hole. Here, I sort of darned into the cloth. So that was where the hole was, but the rest of it, there's another hole there. So you can start to be quite creative about what you do within knitwear, all with the darning principle. But I have to say, as a rule, I'm not hugely keen on darning. I like things like this. I like the addition of a chain stitch to hide a hole. Here's another block of chain stitch hiding a hole. I like this here. This is an elbow patch I'm particularly fond of, because if you do it in the right color, it looks really nice. So it's not like a lumpy bit of darned elbow patching. If you're good at beautiful darning, then good on you. You probably would want to do that. But this is a much easier to master for somebody who's less confident, really. And I like that sort of design. Now, thin button-down shirts. Karen, can you tell me what the problems are with thin button-down shirts?
Oh, hi. Yes. So I like to wear button-down shirts, but sometimes after washing them a couple of times, they get a hole like in the front side. And I don't know what is the best way to repair it, like cover it up with a design like you were saying, or is there a way to just patch it up in a way that it will not, because some of the materials sometimes are so thin that are see-through.
Yeah, I completely get that. I can completely get that. So it rather depends where they are. If they're in a place on the front or the back where you could extend it, like run a piece of cloth in a design on it, then you're going to have to do a bigger area. Or if they're just little patches, you need to make it look a little bit purposeful. So with thin fabric, you need to reinforce it. So you're going to have to do what I've done. Oh, I haven't got the sample in here. Guys, I know where it's something I did for my daughter is. I'm just going to go and get it. So hold on. It's thicker than you're talking about, but the principle is the same. It's good to find a really less expensive, quite slim, thinnish, some fabric, and I'll look and see if I've got some in a minute. And then you put other fabric behind it, again, as we looked before. And here I put a piece of t-shirt, but you'd put your fairly fine piece of probably cotton. You'd want a woven cloth. Because this is pajamas, I just put a little bit of t-shirt behind it because it's nice and soft against the body. Then you take some embroidery floss, or you take some thread. I mended a silk blouse, which someone else has got now, with very fine thread, so more like this thread in the matching color. And again, you just do those little stitches up and down, or I did this round in squares. And you want to hold down the mending cloth. I did this 6 months ago and it's been worn a lot, so it's looking a little bit worn. But you just hold the threads into place and that secures the material. Might that help?
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
If you want the technique, look at this little video that I've done.
Okay.
If you hang on a second, I'm just going to look on my shelves and see if I can illustrate the type of material you're needing to find. Hold on. It's something, I think, that is almost like this. Yeah, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. This, in fact, is a 100% cotton woven interfacing cloth, and it's got glue on one side. So you could cut this in a patch iron it on, and then the glue will melt, secure it in position, and then you can embroider on top. This is a very inexpensive cloth, and you could find that through a sewing supplier. Let me think, interfacing. Yeah, interfacing, 100% cotton, fine interfacing.
Interface. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you.
All right.
so
and
I've run out of time.
Yes, yes. But there's so many great
Perfect.
questions. I feel so bad cutting you off because there's so many great questions, but I highly, highly recommend everybody check out Roz's website, repairwhatyouwear.com, because there are so many great resources, like she's been saying, and all very helpful videos.
Someone's asked on replacing a zipper. I've been working on it for ages. I'm doing a huge long jacket and I got a bit bored and the weather got a bit better. So I put it aside, but yes, there will be a zipper soon.
Great, great. So yes, I just want to thank you, Roz, for your helpful and engaging presentation today and being part of our Earth Week celebration. We really appreciate it. I know everyone here has learned something new today that we'll take with us and we'll use as we all work for a more inclusive and sustainable future. And just a reminder to the attendees to check out the rest of our Earth Week schedule. There's a lot of really great events happening today and tomorrow and Friday. So yeah, and everybody can check out this recording. It will be posted later in the week if they want to refer back to it. But thank you again, Roz. We really appreciate it. That was great.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed meeting you, and all get mending, guys. Spread the word.
Yes, we
Bye.
are motivated. Bye, everyone.
Bye.